The air was thick with tension as I sat across from my parents in their living room, the same room where I'd played as a child, oblivious to the undercurrents of favoritism that would one day tear us apart. My brother Nathan lounged in an armchair, a smug look on his face, his wife, Elise, perched on the armrest like a queen surveying her domain. "Alex, we've been thinking," my mother began, her voice laced with a forced casualness that did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. "With Nathan's growing family, they really need more space. And your house is just sitting there, empty." I blinked, stunned. "What do you mean, my house is just sitting there? I live there. It's my home." Nathan cleared his throat, drawing attention to himself. "Look, bro, it's not like you're married or have kids. You can manage in a smaller place. Think of the children." Elise nodded vigorously, her lips curled into a condescending smile. "Exactly. It's about what's best for the family. And your little two-bedroom is perfect for us." My heart raced, anger and disbelief swirling within me. "You want me to give up my home? The home I worked hard for, just because you've decided you need it more?" My father, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke. "Alex, it's about being practical. Nathan is the future of this family. You know how these things work." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was beyond entitlement, it was a betrayal. "So, what? My needs don't matter? My life doesn't matter?" "Alex, don't be dramatic," my mother chided. "We're just asking you to think about someone other than yourself for once." The room spun as their words echoed in my head. I had always known Nathan was the golden child, but this was a new low. "And where am I supposed to go? You kicked me out because there was no space, and now you want my house too?" Nathan shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Not our problem, bro. You're resourceful. You'll figure something out." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "No. I won't be bullied into giving up my home. This is insane." Elise scoffed. "Oh, please. You're being selfish. It's just a house. Family comes first." "Family?" I laughed bitterly. "This is how you treat family? By taking everything from them?" My parents exchanged uneasy glances, but it was clear where their loyalties lay. I had lost them to Nathan's manipulation long ago. "I'm done," I declared, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "You can't have my house. And if this is what family means to you, then maybe I'm better off without one." Turning on my heel, I walked out of the house, the door slamming shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my soul. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I knew there was no going back. The battle lines were drawn, and I was on my own. But I was determined to fight. For my home, for my dignity, and for a future free from the shadows of entitlement that had darkened my family for too long. As I began to peel back the layers of deceit within my family, the depth of their betrayal became painfully clear. It wasn't just about the house, it was a lifetime of favoritism and manipulation coming to light. The realization hit me hard one evening as I sat across from my best friend, Mark, in the dimly lit corner of our favorite local bar. The clinking of glasses and the low murmur of conversations around us provided a comforting backdrop to the tumult in my mind. "Alex, you've been staring at that beer for the last 20 minutes. What's going on in that head of yours?" Mark's voice broke through my reverie, his concern evident. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's my family, the whole situation with the house. It's just the tip of the iceberg, Mark. There's so much more going on." Mark leaned in, his expression serious. Talk to me. What have you found out? Taking a deep breath, I recounted the recent discoveries. Remember how I told you about my brother, Nathan, and how they want to give him my house? Well, I started digging a bit, looking through old emails, bank statements. It's like they've been planning this for years, Mark. Not just the house, but controlling everything. My parents have been funneling money into Nathan's accounts, even paying off his debts behind my back. Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. Alex, that's insane. Why would they do that? And why keep it a secret from you? I shook my head, frustration boiling inside me. Because I was never the favorite, Mark. It's always been Nathan. I was just too blind to see it. But now, everything's coming into focus. They've been manipulating me, using me, and I fell for it every single time. Mark reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. So, what's your plan? You can't let them get away with this. A determined fire lit within me as I met Mark's gaze. I'm going to fight back. I've already contacted a lawyer, someone who doesn't know my family. I'm gathering all the evidence I can. Bank records, emails, anything that shows their manipulation and favoritism. Good for you, man. But be careful, Alex. This sounds like it's going to get ugly, Mark warned, his voice laced with concern. I nodded, a grim smile on my lips. I know. But I can't let them control my life anymore. It's time I stood up for myself. And who knows what else I'll uncover along the way? As we continued to talk, plotting my next moves and considering the potential fallout, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment. For the first time in my life, I was taking control, stepping out of the shadows cast by my family's entitlement. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on. The consequences of my family's actions began to materialize faster than I had anticipated. It wasn't just a rift forming, it was a chasm, wide and deep, threatening to swallow any semblance of familial bonds we had left. The realization of this hit me one chilly evening as I sat huddled in my truck, the only home I felt I had left. My phone buzzed incessantly, a mix of missed calls and messages from various family members, each one a cocktail of guilt-tripping and veiled threats. I finally mustered the courage to answer a call from my mother. The moment I hit accept, her voice, laced with a concoction of disappointment and manipulation, filled the cab. Alex, darling, why are you doing this to us? To your brother? This isn't like you, she began, her words like arrows aimed straight at my resolve. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to just hang up. Mom, this isn't about what I'm doing to you or Nathan. This is about what's been done to me for years. I'm just standing up for myself now. There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was considering my words. But then she continued, but Alex, we're a family. Families stick together. Nathan needs that house. Think about his children. The mention of his kids tugged at my heartstrings, but I quickly reminded myself of the bigger picture. And what about me, Mom? Do I not matter to the family? Where was this sticking together when I was kicked out with nowhere to go? Her sigh was heavy, filled with a mixture of frustration and what I hoped was a hint of guilt. You know it's not like that. We made a decision we thought was best for everyone. Best for everyone, or best for Nathan? I countered, my voice steadier than I felt. The conversation spiraled from there, a merry-go-round of accusations and denials. By the time we hung up, the chasm had widened, and I was left feeling more isolated than ever. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a strange sense of freedom began to take root within me. I was no longer bound by their expectations or manipulations. I was on my own, yes, but I was also free to make my own decisions, to carve out my own path. The next few days were a blur of legal consultations and strategy meetings with my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Diane who had become my beacon of hope. We pored over documents, piecing together a timeline of financial transactions and favoritism that painted a clear picture of my family's dynamics. One afternoon, as we sat in her office surrounded by piles of paperwork, Diane looked up from a bank statement and said, "Alex, you're doing the right thing. It's not going to be easy, but you have a strong case here. Your family, they've been playing fast and loose with your trust and your assets." I nodded, the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. "I know. It's just hard, you know. They're still my family." Diane leaned forward, her eyes kind yet firm. "Sometimes, Alex, the hardest battles we fight are against those we love. But remember, you're fighting for yourself now, for your future. And I'm right here with you." Her words bolstered my spirits, offering a glimmer of light in what felt like an endless night. The fallout from my family's actions was just beginning, but so was my fight for independence and justice. With each passing day, I grew more determined to see this through, no matter the cost. Living out of my truck wasn't just a challenge, it was a daily battle against despair, a test of resilience I wasn't sure I was prepared for. The cramped space became my sanctuary, a metal cocoon shielding me from the storm of my family's betrayal. Yet, it also served as a constant reminder of my isolation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the parking lot I'd chosen for the night, I found myself dialing Mark's number. The phone rang, cutting through the silence of my makeshift home. "Alex? Hey, man, how are you holding up?" Mark's voice was a lifeline in the darkness. I chuckled dryly, the sound echoing off the truck's interior. "Living the dream, Mark. You know, gourmet meals out of cans, scenic views of parking lots. What more could a guy want?" Mark laughed, but there was a hint of concern in his tone. "Sounds luxurious. Listen, Alex, you don't have to do this alone. Why don't you come stay with me for a while?" I hesitated, pride and gratitude warring within me. "I appreciate it, Mark, I really do. But I can't. This is something I need to do on my own." There was a pause, and I could almost see Mark nodding on the other end. "All right, man. But the offer stands, okay? Anytime you need a break from your mobile estate." "Thanks, Mark. That means a lot." I glanced around the dim interior of my truck, the reality of my situation settling in once again. Changing the subject, I asked, "How's the world outside my four-wheeled paradise?" Mark's voice brightened as he filled me in on the mundane details of daily life, the normalcy of which felt like a balm to my weary soul. As we talked, I found myself opening up about my plans, my determination to fight back against my family's machinations. "You know, Diane thinks we have a strong case," I mentioned, a note of hope threading through my words. "That's great, Alex. I told you, she's a shark. If anyone can take on your family, it's her," Mark encouraged. "Yeah, I worry about the fallout, you know. Taking on my family like this, it's going to get ugly." Mark was silent for a moment before responding, "It might, but Alex, you've been dealing with their ugliness in one form or another your whole life. At least this way, you're standing up for yourself. And hey, you've got me and Diane in your corner. We've got your back." His words, simple yet sincere, bolstered my spirits. "Thanks, Mark. That means everything to me." We talked for a while longer, Mark's stories and jokes providing a temporary escape from the confines of my truck. When we finally said our goodbyes, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Settling into my sleeping bag, I gazed through the truck's window at the stars twinkling in the night sky. The struggle for independence was daunting, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could carve out a future on my own terms. The legal battle loomed ahead like a dark cloud, and with each passing day, the tension between my family and me grew thicker. It was during one of those tense days that I found myself sitting across from Diane in her office, surrounded by stacks of documents and legal pads. The air was heavy with anticipation and the faint hum of the office air conditioning. Diane was flipping through a file when she looked up, her gaze sharp. "Alex, we need to talk strategy. Your family isn't going to back down easily, especially with the house on the line. They've already started rallying their resources." I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. I figured as much. What's our move? We stay one step ahead. I've been in touch with a few contacts, gathering more evidence of the financial discrepancies and favoritism. Plus, your testimony is going to be crucial. You need to be prepared for what they might throw at you, Diane explained, her voice steady and reassuring. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I can handle it. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to fight my family like this. Diane offered a sympathetic smile. It's never easy when it's family. But remember, you're fighting for your rights, for your future. That's worth standing up for. Her words bolstered my resolve, and I found myself thinking about the upcoming legal proceedings with a clearer head. It was then that my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was my brother, Nathan. Excusing myself, I stepped outside into the hallway to take the call, bracing myself for the conversation. "Alex, we need to talk," Nathan's voice came through, laced with a mix of frustration and desperation. I sighed, leaning against the wall. "We're talking now." "What is it?" "It's about the house, about everything. Can't we just figure this out without all the lawyers? This is tearing the family apart," he pleaded. The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. "Nathan, you're the one who sided with them. You all made your choice when you decided that house was more important than our relationship." There was a pause on the line, and for a moment, I wondered if he was reconsidering his stance. But then he said, "It's not just about the house, Alex. It's about the family staying together. You're the one pulling away." I felt a bitter laugh escape me. "No, Nathan. I was pushed away, remember? I'm just the first one to push back." The conversation spiraled from there, a back and forth of accusations and denials, until I realized this was getting us nowhere. "Nathan, I have to go. We'll let the lawyers figure this out." Hanging up, I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the residual anger and hurt. When I returned to Diane's office, she gave me a knowing look. "Family matters?" she asked gently. I nodded, settling back into my seat. "Yeah, but it's clear now. The battle lines are drawn. There's no turning back." Diane leaned forward, her eyes determined. "Then we'll make sure we're ready for whatever comes our way. You're not in this alone, Alex." Her assurance was a small comfort in the storm that was brewing. As I left her office that day, the reality of my situation settled in. I was about to go head-to-head with my own family in court. The battle lines were indeed drawn, and there was no telling how this would end. But one thing was certain: I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. The legal battle had been raging for weeks, each day feeling like a month. The strain of facing my family in court, of hearing them paint me as the villain, was taking its toll. Yet, amidst the chaos, an unexpected ally emerged, shifting the dynamics in a way I hadn't dared hope. It was a late Thursday afternoon when my phone rang, the caller ID flashing a name I hadn't seen in years: Aunt Clara. My father's sister had always been a bit of an outlier in the family, often clashing with my parents over their handling of Nathan and me. I hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what prompted her call. "Alex, it's Aunt Clara. I've been following what's been happening, and I can't stay silent anymore. We need to talk," she said, her voice firm yet tinged with warmth. Surprised, I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe the following day. The anticipation of what she might say, of what bombshell she could drop, kept me awake most of the night. Sitting across from Aunt Clara the next day, the years seemed to have treated her kindly, her presence still as commanding as I remembered. After exchanging pleasantries, she wasted no time diving into the heart of the matter. "Alex, I've watched how your parents and Nathan have treated you, and it's not right. I have something that might help your case," she began, her eyes locking onto mine. I leaned in, my interest piqued. "What is it?" Aunt Clara slid an envelope across the table. "Letters and emails between your parents and me. It's all there: how they favored Nathan, their plans for the house, even discussions about disinheriting you. I tried to reason with them, but they wouldn't listen. I thought you should have this." My hands trembled as I took the envelope, the weight of her gesture not lost on me. "Aunt Clara, thank you. This could change everything." She reached out, squeezing my hand. "You deserve better, Alex." It's time the truth came out. Armed with Aunt Clara's evidence, Diane and I prepared for the next court date with renewed vigor. The atmosphere in the courtroom was charged as we presented the new documents, watching as the judge and opposing counsel pored over them. The turning point came when my parents were called to the stand, their confidence wavering under the weight of Aunt Clara's letters. Their attempts to dismiss the evidence faltered as Diane expertly tied their own words back to them, leaving little room for doubt about their intentions. During a recess, I found myself standing outside the courtroom, trying to process the morning's events, when Nathan approached me. The tension between us was palpable, but there was a weariness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Alex, I didn't know about those letters." "About a lot of things," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I studied him for a moment, the years of resentment and hurt mingling with a cautious hope. "Nathan, it's not just about the letters. It's about how we got here, how we let things get this far." He nodded, looking down. "I know. I've been a part of the problem. I'm sorry, Alex. Truly." The conversation was cut short as we were called back into the courtroom, but it marked the beginning of a shift in our relationship. The trial continued, but the revelation of Aunt Clara's letters had turned the tide in my favor. As the legal proceedings drew to a close, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and sadness. Winning the case meant protecting my rights and my future, but it also underscored the deep fractures within my family. Walking out of the courtroom, the verdict in my favor, I realized that while the battle had been won, The journey toward healing and understanding was just beginning. The tides of change had brought unexpected allies and revelations, but they also offered a glimmer of hope for reconciliation, however distant it might seem. The day of the final confrontation arrived with a heavy air of anticipation. The courtroom was stark, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over everything. I sat at a table with Diane, my lawyer, reviewing notes and trying to steady my nerves. Across the room, my family sat huddled together, casting occasional glances in my direction. The tension between us was palpable, a tangible force that seemed to fill the space. As the judge entered, everyone rose, and a solemn silence enveloped the room. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself for what was about to come. The proceedings began with a formality that felt almost surreal, given the emotional turmoil churning within me. "Mr. Anderson," the judge addressed me, her voice firm yet not unkind. "You've brought this case against your family over the dispute of your inheritance and allegations of financial manipulation. Are you prepared to present your case?" I nodded, my voice steady as I replied, "Yes, Your Honor." Diane stood, her presence commanding as she began to lay out our case. She spoke of the years of financial discrepancies, the favoritism shown towards my brother Nathan, and the ultimate betrayal over the family home. As she presented evidence and called witnesses, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Then, it was my family's turn. Their lawyer, a slick man with a persuasive tone, tried to paint a picture of a misunderstanding, of a family trying to do what was best for everyone. My brother took the stand, his testimony a mix of half-truths and outright lies. Listening to him, I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. How could he stand there and deny everything, knowing the truth? I caught his eye, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, or maybe just regret. Finally, it was my turn to testify. Standing before the court, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I told my story, my voice clear and unwavering. I spoke of the years of being overlooked, of the promises made and broken, and of the moment I realized my family saw me not as a loved one, but as an obstacle to their desires. As I spoke, I could see the impact of my words on the judge, and even on some members of my family. My mother looked down, unable to meet my gaze, while my father's face was a mask of stoicism. When I finished, there was a heavy silence, broken only by the judge's voice as she called for a recess before making her final decision. I returned to my seat, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Diane gave me an encouraging nod, her confidence bolstering my own. The wait for the judge's return was agonizing, each minute stretching out endlessly. When she finally re-entered the room, the air was thick with anticipation. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented, the judge began, her voice resonating through the courtroom, "I find in favor of Mr. Alexander Anderson." A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it left me momentarily breathless. The judge continued, outlining the terms of the judgment, but her words were a blur. I had won. After all the pain and betrayal, justice had prevailed. As the courtroom began to empty, I remained seated, the reality of the moment sinking in. Diane was speaking to me, but her words were distant, muffled by the rush of emotions overwhelming me. Then, unexpectedly, my brother approached. He hesitated before me, a look of genuine remorse on his face. "Alex, he began, but the words seemed to fail him. I looked up at him, the years of hurt and anger between us hanging heavily in the air. Yet, in that moment, I realized that holding on to that bitterness would only anchor me to the past. "Nathan," I interrupted, my voice firm but not unkind. Save it. Let's just try to move forward, okay? He nodded, a look of relief crossing his features. Yeah. I'd like that. As he walked away, I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that rebuilding our relationship, if it was even possible, would take time. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope for the future. The final confrontation had ended, not with the fiery clash I had anticipated, but with a quiet acknowledgement of the pain we had all endured. And as I left the courtroom that day, I felt lighter, freed from the weight of the past and ready to face whatever came next. The dust had settled in the wake of the courtroom battle, leaving a silence that was both comforting and unsettling. The victory was mine, but it came at a cost. The family I once knew was fractured, perhaps beyond repair. Yet, amidst the ruins, there was a sense of liberation, a freedom to rebuild my life on my own terms. A few weeks after the verdict, I found myself sitting across from Diane at a small cafe, the clatter of dishes and murmur of conversations around us. We were reviewing the final paperwork, but my mind was elsewhere, lost in the whirlwind of recent events. "You did well, Alex," Diane said, her voice pulling me back to the present. "It takes courage to stand up like you did." I offered a wry smile, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. Courage or desperation? Sometimes, I'm not sure there's a difference. Diane chuckled, closing the folder in front of her. Perhaps a bit of both. But it's over now. You can start fresh. Start fresh, I echoed, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. For so long, my identity had been tied to my battle with my family, to the struggle for the house and for recognition. Now, with that chapter closed, I was adrift, uncertain of what the future held. As if reading my thoughts, Diane leaned forward. "What will you do now, Alex? Have you thought about it?" I sighed, gazing out the window at the bustling street beyond. "I've been thinking about it a lot, actually. I want to travel, see the world a bit. Maybe write about it. I've always loved writing, but I never had the chance to pursue it." "That sounds wonderful," Diane said, her eyes bright with genuine interest. A fresh start, indeed. Our conversation shifted then to lighter topics, but Diane's question lingered in my mind. What would I do now? The possibilities were endless, a thought both exhilarating and daunting. Later that day, I found myself at the park, walking along the winding paths, lost in thought. It was there that I ran into Mark, as if by fate. "Alex. I was hoping I'd find you here," he said, falling into step beside me. I smiled, grateful for the company. "Just doing some thinking. About the future, you know?" Mark nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's a blank slate, man. You can do anything you want. So, what's the plan?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "Everyone keeps asking me that. I guess I want to find myself again. Rediscover who I am without all the family drama." "Sounds like a plan to me," Mark said, clapping me on the back. "And hey, if you need a travel buddy or someone to read your drafts, you know where to find me." His offer warmed my heart, a reminder of the steadfast support I had in my friends. "Thanks, Mark. That means a lot." As we continued our walk, the conversation flowed easily, the future no longer a looming uncertainty but a canvas waiting to be painted. I realized then that the aftermath of the battle wasn't just about picking up the pieces, it was about creating something new, something wholly mine. The final confrontation with my family had closed a painful chapter of my life, but it had also opened the door to endless possibilities. With each step I took, I felt lighter, more hopeful. The path ahead was uncharted, but I was ready to explore it, to discover what lay beyond the shadows of entitlement.